Okay, it is now 6 p.m. I'm Michelle Denning. Welcome to the October 27th NCS Board of Directors meeting. I will be chairing the meeting tonight in Jane's absence, and we'll go ahead and establish a quorum. And I'm going to do that by roll call. So when I call your name, if you'll answer present. Nicole Booker.
Present.
Dawn Dixon.
Present.
Rodney Dunn. Robbie Taylor.
Present.
Benji Woodard. And Paul Worley. And Nicole, if you will also reflect that I'm present as well, Michelle Denning.
Will do.
And I think Benji Woodard is just signed on as well. Benji, if you'll just say present.
Present.
I believe Paul has signed on as well. Paul, we are doing roll call. If you'll say present, Paul Worley.
Present.
Okay. And did Rodney join us? Okay. Well, having established a quorum, I hereby call the NCS Board of Directors meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. on October the 27th. We'll move forward with our ethics statement. Conflict of interest reminder per NCGS 138A-15E, board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any board member now know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. Hearing none, if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair of the meeting. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion of the matter and from voting on the matter. We'll proceed now to the reading and approval of our September minutes. I believe they were added to your drives, the shared drive. So we can either read these aloud or silently, or if everyone has read them, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Nicole Booker.
Second, Robbie Tyler.
We have a motion and we have a second. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote on the motion to approve the September board minutes. Nicole Booker.
Aye.
Dawn Dixon.
Aye.
Robbie Taylor.
Aye.
Benji Woodard.
Aye.
Paul Worley.
Aye.
And Michelle Denning, aye. Okay, next we'll move on to our public comments. Do we have any public comments? Hearing none, we will move on to the next section of our agenda, which is guest discourse, and this will be in this particular section, Dr. Carpenter will actually be doing a small presentation and training for us. So Dr. Carpenter, I will turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to need to share my screen to proceed. I'm not quite sure if someone can tell me how to do that.
At the bottom, there should be a button that says present now.
Okay.
On the right-hand side.
Yeah, I think someone on your end has to give me permission to be able to do that.
Actually, you should have permission.
Dr. Carpenter, Brad said that you should have permission.
Okay, here we go. Well, no, Brad, my share button is disabled. Oh, wait a second. I got it here. Sorry, guys. I'm an old dog. This technology stuff is not my primary language. Okay, so I'm going to put something up here, and before I start talking about it, confirm that you all can see it. 1 second here.
So are we doing the board development now?
Yeah, just I call it micro training.
Okay.
Probably not even 10 minutes. All right, can you all see the document that I have open on my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what does the first line of it say?
YPA's overall student-teacher ratio is about 17-1.
All right, perfect. So, glad to be with you all this evening. You might remember from the training that I presented to you a month or so ago that I talked quite a bit that day about York Preparatory Academy, not too far away from y'all, located just across the state line in South Carolina, Rock Hill, South Carolina. This is a school at the time in 2015-16 was a school of approximately 1,500 students in grades K through 12, located on a single campus. And what started out as a training and evaluation gig for me ended up resulting in being their interim leader for the 2015-16 school year. So when I was doing the analysis work, and then later again after I agreed to be their interim while they did a search, one of the things that I looked at was their finances. And this red text that you see on the screen is an exact, unedited copy and paste right out of the report that I wrote to the board in late 2014. So the board said we need to know what's wrong with operations. We're not performing like we should. Why don't we have any money was one of the questions I heard loud and clear. Why don't we have any money? And that's a good question, right? Like York Prep, you all want to improve your academic performance, and you want to give teachers raises, and you're trying to figure out where's the money going to come from. So in my initial report to them, I said that their overall student teacher, or actually you'd see it more commonly written as teacher student, but either way you want to interpret it, was 17-1 campus-wide. This worked out to an average of about 19-1 in elementary, 17-1 in the middle school, and 14-1 in the high school. As is typical in schools, the elementary school often subsidizes the secondary program because you have fewer students overall and a greater need for more teachers because of the highly specialized things that learn in high school. The school's bond payment, principal and interest that year that I was doing the analysis, constituted 23% of its operating budget, and its debt service, which included 9 additional obligations, was roughly about 25%. And this is a big, big number because normally what I advise schools is 15 to 17%, 19% if you're in a high rent district like San Diego or someplace like that. And once your debt ratio, your debt service obligation starts inching north of about 20%, you're going to be strapped for cash basically. So I observed that, and then the CFO, who had only been there 6 months at the time I wrote this report, was currently forecasting a year-end revenue over expense of about $114,000. For those of you who speak the accounting language, that is the EBITDA, the forecast EBITDA. If you don't speak the accounting language, we'll call that the cash profit. What was significant about that amount, though, was it was less than 1% of the school's approximate $12 million budget. So not a lot of money to do anything. By the end of the year, however, all of the following things occurred. All the teachers received substantial raises at the start of the year, and by the end of the year, we actually implemented the school's first ever pay scale to standardize it all, and there's good risk management reasons for doing that. We generated a net income, or if you will, a profit of 5%. And again, for the people who speak accounting language, that's a 5% EBITDA, so that's real money in the bank. We also made substantial computer purchases that year, or leases, and we settled some pretty significant old debts, cleared some debts right off the balance sheet. So how many of you so far would like to know, I'm going to go back to my camera here for a second, how many of you would like to know how we did it? How many of you think we know how we did it? Dr. Edwards knows. All right. This is how we did it. We put that right there. We consolidated, the first thing we did after I became the interim headmaster, we consolidated administration. So we had to eliminate some positions. The org chart was a mess because, like you, the school had gone through a handful of leaders in as many years. The org chart wasn't really the result of any coherent, consistent plan. It was just a constantly changing thing that would be modified with the advent of every new leader. So we had to clean that up. The result of that was everyone who remained, including myself, had to wear even more hats than they were. So, for example, the CFO and I shared responsibilities for supervising our bus drivers, HR, compliance reporting, and a lot of other stuff that normally neither the CFO nor the interim CEO would do. Secondly, we did review every existing contract that the school had engaged in. We renegotiated some and we canceled some others. For example, we had a yard maintenance contract. We had about, I think, 40 acres of grass that had to be cut during the grassy season. As we looked at the contract on that, we saw that the vendor had an annual 10% automatic increase, auto renewal clause. So we just notified him that at the end of the year the contract was canceled, and we allowed him to renegotiate. But obviously, we got rid of clauses like that. That's not a prudent, in my opinion. That's not a prudent clause within a contract. But the real magic that I have here in bold is this one right here, the teacher-student ratio. And you remember that, go back here, the overall campus average was 17-1, and the board was asking me, why don't we have any money on a $12 million budget? So this is what we did, and this is a real example, although the numbers are ballparked, but to the best of my recollection, these were the actual numbers. So the school was big enough that we had 5 sections of kindergarten students. We had 18 students in each classroom. I used $8,000 as sort of my down and dirty figure when I'm trying to guesstimate revenues for this type of thing. So that's may not be exactly how it works itself out in North Carolina, but it would be pretty close probably. So those 18 students times 5 sections times $8,000 would generate approximately $720,000 in state and federal revenues, most of it being state money, as is always the case. And I changed that to 5 sections, of kindergarten students with 24 students each, which generates approximately $960,000. This created a difference just on this one action of $240,000. And again, to put that in the context of a $12 million budget, that was 2% of our budget. So a huge number. And then that wasn't the only, kindergarten was not the only grade level in which we added students. Now, what are the ramifications of doing this? Well, one of the ramifications already shared with you, we suddenly had money to do stuff, big stuff. But there were also negative ramifications. First of all, a greater workload for teachers. In the kindergarten were the most dramatic increases were made, this meant 6 more students per class. So needless to say, it wasn't, let's say, it wasn't warmly embraced right from the outset by the teachers. Secondly, some of the parents, not very many, but we heard from some of them that didn't particularly like the additional 6 students. There are other ramifications as well. Before you do something like this, you do have to think about your physical facilities, what their capacity is. We had the capacity. In fact, our kindergarten rooms all had their own standalone bathrooms, so you eliminate all the transit time trying to take young children down the hallway. All the kindergarten students had full-time teaching assistants in each of their classrooms. That existed beforehand. So the real ramification, though, was that it finally shifted the school away from scrapping for nickels and pennies and wasting an awful lot of instructional time every year on fundraisers, trying to make ends meet. It shifted the school into a position where it was able to pay competitive or closer to competitive salaries. And that was the beginning. Now, as Paul Harvey used to say, if you guys are old enough to remember the rest of the story, Paul Harvey used to say, that was the rest of the story was this. After a permanent director was hired at the end of my interim year, he continued the policy, also grew enrollment. They've added more than 100 students now, but he continued the policy. And so now 5 years later, on top of many other amazing accomplishments that school has done, they just built a brand new field house, a 2-story field house. So on the top floor, you have a gym that's with new equipment that is exclusively for faculty and staff use. Take good care of your teachers that way. They build a cafeteria in which they will cook and serve their own food, which will be its own profit center. And they have, on the top floor of the field house, they have a great meeting room that could serve all kinds of purposes, board meeting, medium to moderate size groups. Beautiful field house. I don't remember the exact numbers, but they paid cash for the whole thing. And I want to say it was about $2 million, but don't hold me to that. How do you build a field house? 5 years earlier, you have a school that's saying, we don't have any money and we don't know why. 5 years later, they were the first, either the very first or among the very first schools in South Carolina to offer a $40,000 a year starting salary for teachers, which is significant. And they built this field house in cash, and they still have more money in the bank than they really know what to do with it at the present time. How do you explain that? The secret, and I chose this as our topic for tonight because I know you all are embarking on the strategic planning process as a board and as a school. The secret was that primarily that one lever. So as you think about strategic planning, and for those of you who do strategic planning in your day jobs, it's always a Pareto distribution. 20% of your inputs explain 80% of your results. So as you're trying to reposition your school, improve academics, do a strategic plan, I would encourage you to think about and really study your ratios, study your facility sizes, and start doing some calculations about the kind of money that could be being generated through larger class sizes. Lastly, in talking with Dr. Edwards in the last 2 weeks and preparing for this, she looked up or computed or had somebody compute your average ratio, and it is a shade over about 1 FTE teacher to about 15 and a half students. And my response to her email was, oh my, because when that is your campus average, you are going to be just struggling for nickels and pennies and dimes and whatever you can find. And you will never, ever, ever, ever reverse that curve without changing that one lever. But there are a lot of ramifications. But I wanted to show that to you because that was one of the earliest decisions that I instituted at York Prep, and it became the gas for the engine to turn the school around.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, I'll briefly entertain questions and then pass the floor back to you.
Hey, Dr. Cochran, this is Ronnie. I got a question. I want to make sure I understand what you were describing. So from a ratios number perspective, if I understood your point, you were saying that basically when you have a higher ratio of student to teacher, when we got financial probation about 5 or 6 years ago, we were at about 76% of our total operating budget was in salaries and benefits. So that was 24% operating, which included all facilities, and it was just too expensive.
Yep.
If I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is a good model to consider is that in your early stage grades where you have a higher student to teacher ratio, if you load your student population on the front end, there's potentially more money to be in the system than you load them higher. Is that correct?
It is, and the reason is pretty elementary, and that is your teaching costs are basically fixed, right? So wherever you set the ratio of students to teachers, and you say, okay, it takes X teachers for this many kids, you've now created essentially a set of fixed costs, but the revenues are variable, meaning that you can increase the revenue relatively speaking, well, not just relatively speaking, but absolutely speaking, i.e. 6 more kids that you weren't going to let into a given classroom. And that's why it works that way. Now, there was obviously we added $240,000, didn't do everything I described in that little presentation. So we were also adding students in other rooms, but we were already running in the middle school, 1 to 19. And so we pushed those up to average again. We pushed those up everywhere we could. And the way we did that, by the way, again, you have to look at your facilities and make sure that your fire marshal will sign off on it and that it actually works. I'm not at all advocating, meat locker type situation. But we everywhere we could add a 2, 3, 4 more students to like a middle school grade. We did that, and what that does is it buys you time to build out your high school grades. So now 5 years later, York Prep's high school grades are all full, but at that time they were only 5 years old, and their high school grades were not running anywhere near capacity. So it buys you time, and it gives you the money to create a truly exceptional academic program, which then draws the enrollment, which then gives you more money, which then allows you to pay better faculty salaries, better compensation. Frankly, what most schools do to put this bluntly is they build the school on the backs of the teachers by undercompensating them, and at the same time, though, keeping the classroom ratios too low. So part of the education process as you're exploring the potential for your school in the strategic planning process would be to begin educating teachers about the potential impacts that would be favorable to them. So for example, at YPA today, nobody complains about having 24 kids in the classroom because they were one of the first or the first, sorry, I can't remember, first school in the state to say, we've got a starting salary of $40,000. Close thought, still an answer to your question, partly. I want to be clear in saying more money does not make a competent teacher teach better. More money allows the school to hire the most competent teachers to begin with and to retain them. Because even though they're drawn to education for a love of children, at least that's what we hope, they still have to pay their bills. And a love of children doesn't buy any loaves of bread or gallons of milk at the grocery store. So at the end of the day, after you've done the analytical work on this and you're trying to make a decision, it really is going to come down to, at the board level, and this really is a board level kind of thing, it really does come down to what kind of school do we want, because it takes money. That's all there is to it. Right now, you're relying on the missionary model, and that can only get you so far.
So one last follow-up question, if I may then. So in that model you talked about, do you view it as some form of pyramid from an enrollment perspective up through your grades, so that you don't necessarily look to backfill one for one all through K-12 as students naturally attrit? So is it more of some form of pyramid shaped model in a K through 12, or is the ultimate goal at 5 to 10 years in that, if you've got 200 kids in, say, kindergarten, I'm gonna make it up, that your model is that you would expect that you would graduate 200 kids in K through 12, even if you have to backfill at various degrees through those periods of time?
Yeah, it just kind of works out that way by itself. It's not so much I don't think that's how administrators, sort of design it by intention, but in the typical school, it just kind of works out to a pyramid because of the natural attrition that you often see. It starts in elementary, so yeah, if you can just, completely load up your K-1-2, for example, as that attrition pyramid starts upward, you hopefully get left with enough students until you reach the point where the high school will fund itself. And York Prep's high school is funding itself now. They're not dependent on the elementary to subsidize it, which again puts more money back into the budget to allow you to compensate teachers, have the materials you need, and all of that. So it requires a lot of analysis. I'm just giving you some very rough cut snapshots of what it can look like. But for York Prep, that turning point from a money standpoint came when we said we're just not leveraging all the space and talent that we have here. And when we did that, everything changed.
Thank you.
Dr. Carpenter, just a quick question. Increasing class size seems a bit counterintuitive to academic success. Am I wrong? How do we settle folks' minds who hear that and are unnerved by that?
Yeah, and that is the infinite question. And educators, predictably, are all over the map about their opinions. So all I can do is tell you my opinion and the basis for my opinion, and but fully acknowledging up front that for every administrator, recovering school leader like me, and keep in mind I ran schools for a dozen years before I stepped up to York Prep, so that wasn't my first rodeo. But for every administrator like me, I can find one or two others that would take the opposite position. But here's my opinion, the basis for my opinion, and I'll let you noodle on that. So my opinion is an effective teacher or a competent teacher, and I have to start with that phrase because the reality is, the hard truth is, of course, not all teachers are competent, right? Just because they have a license doesn't mean they're competent. When I say a competent teacher, I'm looking for a teacher who is focused on instruction and gets results. So a competent teacher has no difficulty managing a class of anywhere between 2 dozen, and I've done some private school stuff where we had 3 dozen students. Now there's implications there. What are the behavioral issues that the kids are bringing? How many of them are bringing the behavioral issues? What are the levels of impoverishment? York Prep is not a particularly impoverished school, so we didn't have a slew of impoverished kids showing up every day. So there's these variables that are subtle, but they work their way into your thinking. But as a generality, in my experience, a competent teacher has no difficulty managing a class and producing results of 24 to say 3 dozen students on the very upper end. The basis for that opinion is 30 years of being an educator and experimenting with what works and seeing what works and trying to balance budgets and generate revenues and all those responsibilities. I also base my beliefs on the work of John Hattie, Hattie. You all might recall I mentioned his name almost in passing the day we did the full board training. He is the only researcher in the world to have synthesized what's got to be north of 1,000 meta-studies in education, which themselves are meta-analyses of more than 50,000 studies in education. So you get into some fairly complicated statistical stuff that isn't really the nuts and bolts of what we do at the board level, but at the administrator level, when you've got that kind of data as your power, you can easily figure out from his research what works and what doesn't work. And the research on class size, with some exceptions that I mentioned, is it's not the power level that we often think of it as. Or to say it differently, if I have a competent teacher in kindergarten classroom, let's just stick with that example. If I have a competent teacher, he or he can deliver results for those 24 students just as ably as they could with 18 students. So again, not a popular message and not one that people are going to quickly rally around you as a board. If people come up to you in church, I don't know if this happens to you, but they come up to you in church to complain about what's happening in school, you're going to hear about it. But at the end of the day, what you're really going to be left with as a decision is how well do we want to compensate our folks? And on that basis, what kind of program are we building for the future? And you can't do any of that without money. And this is the principal way that you get it. Yeah, you can go scare up a few little grants, but you're not going to score any long-term funding chasing grant money around. That's gravy. You use your grant money for the gravy projects, not for your basic operating budget. Hope that helps, Nicole. But as I say, for every person like me who's convinced of what the research means and how they get results, I can find at least one other administrator. So I don't know if it's an exact 50-50 split, but it's not a universally agreed upon truth. But I can tell you from experience, it's very doable.
Okay,
Right,
are there any other,
Is that
any
it on
other questions? Okay, Dr. Carpenter, thank you very much for that. We really appreciated that. Very useful information, so thank you. Next item on our agenda is correspondence from our authorizer. Dr. Edwards, do we have any correspondence from Office of Charter Schools or any other entity that you need to share with us?
I would just want to let you know that this month we have 2 reports that were due to Epicenter. Epicenter is the Office of Charter Schools document management platform. And those 2 reports, one of which was a CO for all of our facilities, and the other was a funds evidence of a North Carolina retirement system minimum. Both of those reports were submitted by Amanda Heifel on the 26th, so yesterday. So we have met the reporting requirements for OCS for October.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is our superintendent report. And Dr. Edwards, I will turn the floor back over to you again.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to jump in and start out with some good news with Dr. Schwartzlander.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me this time to share with the board and our community some good news that's happening on our campus. And the first and most impactful piece of news I'd like to share is our partnership with Johnston County Schools Child Nutrition Department. Through a grant from the USDA and the Summer Feeding Program and federal waivers, our students were offered free hot lunch for the remainder of the 2020-21 school year. There is no income requirement. There is no application. This is a federal grant to feed all children under the age of 18 in our county. And one of the Johnston County Child Nutrition employees reached out to Ms. Cummings, our primary academy counselor, and said, hey, we have these funds. We would love to partner with Noose. How can we make this happen? And each day that we have been able to deliver around 275 hot lunches to our students on campus 4 days a week. I think that is an incredible boon to our community. And I'm very proud of the fact that we are able to do that for our students. I'd also like to just take a moment and publicly recognize the absolutely outstanding child nutrition staff at Triple S. They are hardworking, they are kind, they are incredibly flexible, and they always have smiles on their faces at 10:45 in the morning when we go and pick up these lunches. So I really just want to publicly thank them for the work they're doing to help feed our students. This week is also Red Ribbon Week. Red Ribbon Week is the nation's longest running drug prevention campaign. We're going in full force this week. Yesterday was Dress Like a Bee Day to be happy being drug free. Today was Tacky Tourist Day, traveling life drug free. So we have themes for each of the remaining days of the week planned. And moving on just specifically to our upper academy students, I wanted to focus a spotlight on some students who have received some really great awards on their AP performances from last year. Mason Schwartz was the recipient of an AP Scholar with Distinction Award, which means he received an average score of at least 3.5 on all of his AP exams and a score of 3 or higher on 5 or more of those exams. That's outstanding work from one of our Cougar scholars. Delaney Harris and Lily McLam received AP Scholars with Honors Rewards. You'll see they averaged at least 3.25 on all of their AP exams and a score of 3 or higher on 4 or more of those exams. Sarah Bazari, Mackenzie Bruner, Nori Dupree, Spencer Parker, and Taylor Wood all received AP Scholar Awards. This distinction is given to students who receive a score of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. This is just a small snapshot of the amazing work that our Cougar Scholars have done in this past school year, and I know they are continuing to do as we move into second semester, which is right around the corner. We have also are grateful to be able to nominate several students for scholarships at local colleges. Sam Lee has been nominated for the Levine Scholars Program at UNCC, and Taylor Wood and AJ Boyce for the Moorhead Cane at UNC Chapel Hill. And Mason Schwartz and Sam Lee have also been nominated for the Park Scholarship at NC State. So again, just an amazing amount of Cougar scholarship and leadership shown from our students. And you know, our lower academy, they're not receiving these AP awards, but our 5th graders read 1,300 books last month. I mean, way to go, 5th grade. Like, rock it out, keep it going. We are so proud of you, and I am very grateful, NCS board, for you allowing me this time to share this great news with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartzlander. Next up is a brief return to school update. Wanted to just touch base on a notification that was sent out last week to our families. We did have one positive confirmed COVID case on campus that required contact tracing. We have managed all of those pieces. We have been transparent with our families and with our community on how we have managed it, how we will continue to manage situations like that moving forward. We are in continuous contact with the Johnston County Health Department, who are doing a tremendous job of staying on top of things, keeping us updated, staying in communication with families. And I have to just take a moment and give credit where credit is due. We have been open with students on campus since the 2nd week of school we have brought back K-5 students on Plan B 4 days a week. So at average, we have over 600 students on campus, and we've had one positive case thus far. And I think that is definitely a testament to the work that the teachers are doing to remain diligent in sanitizing and being alert and observant of what's happening in their classroom and in the buildings. So very proud of that. Moving on to our ADM for the update. The state did pass House Bill 1105, which allowed public and charter schools to be held harmless for enrollment for this school year, which means that our ADM will be calculated at our ADM for the last school year of 942, which gives us 10 more students than what we would have had at an ADM of 932. Next is the modular update. We are very excited that we are officially in. We have opened for instruction on the 15th. We had a great fun moving day and got everything ready for students and teachers. We are still working on a couple of things. Tomorrow, the Wi-Fi connectivity will begin to take place so that they will have remote access. And we are installing TVs. Teacher desks came in today. Lots of really good things are happening, and it is looking really, really great. Walking through is it's pretty joyful. The very first day we were in there and I walked through, I went back and told some of the admin team, you really just need to go be in there for a minute, because as long and arduous as the road was to get there, it was that moment was certainly worth it. So kudos to the 7th grade teachers for hanging in there with us and being patient, the 7th grade families and students. I think that we are well on our way now to getting settled in finally. Moving on to MAP testing data, want to invite Ms. Nowinski to join us. She is going to share with you the beginning of the year MAP testing data that we have received and some of the key takeaways that we are hoping to present tonight.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to be able to share this MAP data with you. We've been talking about it for a long time, so now here are some real numbers that we can share. There are 2 areas that we will focus on right now, and that is our math performance and our reading performance. And you can tell from the math performance that a majority of our students are performing average or higher compared to the national norm in math. And then same for, thanks, Melissa, 76% of our K-10 students are average or above in math. 82% of our K-10 are average or above in reading. We do have about 24% of our kids below average in math and 18% below average in reading. So we are definitely taking some steps to make sure that we support those kiddos. We were able to test 748 students out of the 822 that were eligible. It was an enormous task, especially when many of our kids were at home trying to take this test remotely, including, kindergartners. So it was quite an undertaking, but we did a great job. So moving forward, what do we want to do with this information? We have set a growth goal for the 2021 school year of anywhere between 1.0 and 1.25 times the national average growth for NWEA. Basically what that means is we want our kids to grow 1 year in 1 year's time, which is what we would expect. But we also would like to see that go a little bit higher. We're not shooting for 1.25 this year. We do want to shoot for 1.25 2021 and beyond because of several reasons. First of all, our data is missing about 100 students. So even though we have some really great numbers, it's not complete information. Our K-2 virtual students required parental assistance to be able to take this test. And so some of the data may be skewed because we're not sure how much assistance those kids received or didn't receive when they were trying to take this test. MAP implementation was new to us as a school, And then put on top of that the newness and everything that we had to deal with COVID. And then NWEA themselves would say that their normative data was not normed on remote testing. And that's what, a lot of kids are having to do across the country. So it may not reflect our current educational environment. So we made a decision to make our growth goal between 1 and 1.25 for this school year. And so how do we plan to meet that goal? As I shared with you a month or so ago, NWEA did come in and do our data-driven training with our teachers on October 7th and October 14th. We're using this data to coordinate interventions for kids who are behind, but also looking at the kids who need to be challenged, so we're not leaving them out of the picture. Cougar Lab is additional time that we have right now for students to receive extra support and interventions if they're struggling, and also a way for us to give our high-achieving students the ability to work on projects or activities that can extend their learning. Also in PLCs, the meetings that we have with teachers biweekly, we're focused on student achievement, where conversations are centered around, what do we need to do more of differently or better so that all of our kids can achieve this growth goal that we have. And then Title I, Ms. Flythe and her highly qualified tutors are doing a great job already using this data to design small group instruction for students who are identified as needing that high level of support. And then finally, Dr. Swartzlander and her student support team really using this information to provide teachers with support for students. They're making home visits to families whose students are not engaging in online learning the way that we want to. They're providing meals and resources to families so that we can meet their basic needs, so then we can have a conversation about academics. And they're also addressing the social and emotional needs of our students and our teachers when they need it. So it's truly a team effort, a community-wide effort, so that we can make sure that the kids who need more instruction get it, and the kids who need to be challenged also receive those services. And that's all I have. Dr. Edwards, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that was a pretty comprehensive overview of where we are right now. We are planning to implement this again in the middle of the year and at the end of the year. Once we see middle of the year testing scores, we will be able to report back on the growth that we've made, and then what work still needs to be done to achieve the goal that we have set for ourselves. And again, reiterating that the ultimate goal is that we are growing over a grade level per year based on the current situation, circumstances that we find ourselves in with adjusting to remote learning, having students who are fully virtual learners. We just opted to create a more realistic goal also with the information that NWEA provided about the national norms not being normed to fully remote learners. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and circle back to my report, and then I'll open it up for questions because I know there's probably some about that. The final piece is that I was asked to give an audit update, and according to our auditor, Jay Sharp, the field work is complete and the financials should be complete this week. We do expect a report by the end of the week. So there is the update for the audit. Two pieces that are currently continuing to be worked on is compensation and HR support. And then we'll need to go into closed session this evening for personnel. So with that being said, I will open it up for questions.
I just have one quick question on that. Can you bring back up that map testing data that you were showing there? Go down a bit. Go down a little bit. That right there, the growth goal of 1.0 to 1.25, was that?
That's a grade level.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand what that number referred to. Okay.
Yeah, it's a grade level. So we want them to grow a grade level. Ultimately, we want them to grow more than a grade level.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Dr. Edwards, this is Michelle. With the MAP testing data, were you able to break things down by grade level or to make any I guess, to see any patterns or anything from the different grade levels that may be beneficial?
We are, so on the bottom of this, we have the breakdowns, which I can share with you. It really gets down into all the numbers and all the pieces here that, again, I'll share so that you all can have a look at that. Actually, it is shared with you. And you can see that we've broken it down by the number of students that were tested, and then the number of students who were high, average, low average, and low. There are some pieces that jumped out at us. Second grade, there's a large number of students who are in the low category for math. And there are some rather impressive numbers for kindergarten. But again, we're also considering the fact that those students required assistance on this test if they're fully remote, and that goes back to being sure we've got as much accurate data as we can. So I will share all of that with you so that you can take a look. I do think, though, once we get the middle of the year data, we'll be able to look at comparing some of the the beginning of the school year and middle of the school year. We're really kind of considering this a baseline for us right now, just to have the data, to start looking at the numbers, start tracking the growth of the students. And so I think in January, we'll be able to see some stronger patterns and make some stronger correlations between the data.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Edwards? Okay, thank you, Dr. Edwards, and Ms. Nowinski and Dr. Schwartzlander. Thank you so much. We're going to now move on to our financial report. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Benji Woodard.
Thank you, Michelle. Starting off with our financial committee meeting minutes. The finance committee met remotely October the 12th. Meeting highlights include: we reviewed our September budget as provided by Acadia. Our September revenue totaled $768,896. Our September expenditures totaled $591,414. Gave us a surplus of $177,482. And year to date, we are currently showing a deficit of $82,887. And as I mentioned, the last two prior months, we will be in arrears until the local revenue payments start arriving to us. And Dr. Edwards is checking into the status of local revenue payments. Next highlight from our monthly meeting was facility loan refinance status. And we shared in that meeting, Lee Jackson gave us a report that the loan has been approved, and more info will be coming to us once we receive guidance on the recent rate changes. So good news, and appreciate the facility committee's work with getting that loan refinance taken care of. Next up, I'd also like to cover our balance sheet. And this is balance sheet data as of 10/21. Our total assets were $2 million, $4,551. Our total liabilities were $63,999. We're going to get those to the record as well. And that is all.
Okay, thank you, Benji. Were there any questions on the financial report? Okay, we'll move on to our standing committee reports. The executive committee is the first committee, and we did not meet. Benji, did you have anything else to report in the committee meetings other than the finance report that you just gave?
No, that is everything.
Okay. Next is academic affairs.
We did not meet.
Okay. And resource development.
We've not met pending the realignment of some of the duties, but we do have the fundraising groups fit policy. And we believe Ms. Edwards has that. Dr. Edwards has that. Is that yours to present?
I didn't hear you, Paul.
Can you hear it? Dr. Edwards, is that yours to present the fundraising group certification policy?
I think it comes down in the unfinished business portion.
That's correct. Okay, thank you, Paul. Next is the Board Development Committee. The Board Development Committee did meet. We met September the 29th, October the 5th, and October the 19th. And pretty much the entire purpose was working on modifying our existing bylaws. What we're doing, we're looking at our current bylaws, looking at the model bylaws that we received that were recommended by Dr. Carpenter, and we actually have started drafting. And I will tell you, it is moving a lot slower than I ever thought that it would. I kind of anticipated we were going to go in and knock this out, and rather, if you have, I use the analogy, if you have seen the movie Cars, and Lightning McQueen is pulling Betsy along to pave the road. That's how it feels, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So we're moving along. We've got we met again actually yesterday on the 26th. We met, and then we've got several meetings scheduled for November as well. So and that's what board development is up to. Is there any questions for board development committee? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to strategic planning committee. And I don't believe that the strategic planning committee met. So we'll move on to facilities.
Oh, so Dr. Edwards has already given a great report about the new modulars. We're excited about those. Still a few things to wrap up there, but thank you, Dr. Edwards, and thank you, Josh, for all the hard work. And that's the report.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay, next we're going to move on to our ad hoc committees. The Systematic Oversight Calendar Committee, I believe that is Nicole.
Sorry, I'm trying to type and think all at one time. Hold on just a moment. I shared our systematic oversight calendar with the board. I began with Dr. Edwards and plugging in dates and events that she deemed appropriate. I've since shared that with the Finance Committee, and they've given some input. I thought it would be ready for approval this meeting, but I don't think we're quite there yet. Rodney and I talked, and he indicated, this is going to be a living document. So we're going to have to amend it as we go, but it's looking good. And so hopefully we'll have more of a finalized document in November. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. There you go. Do we have any questions about the calendar as it stands?
Nicole, I guess as you are working on this, you'll be getting with different individuals and different committees to start plugging in as you build on this.
Yes, and I really think after, what I anticipate doing is, now that Finance at it, going back to Dr. Edwards and just doing a once over and just making sure that everything is as she foresees it needs to be, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Nicole. Any other questions? Okay. Next, under ad hoc committees is our policy committee. I think that is Dawn.
Yes. And Paul has been assisting me, although I've just completed a 6 weeks of doing a federal grant. So I'm literally I wanted to come to this meeting with something, so I apologize, Paul, that I put some stuff together that we had chatted about. I was sent the policy manual from, I think it was Davidson Charter School. It was quite comprehensive, and so I've kind of picked some pieces. But the first step to this is that we need to do a first reading or a first review of policies on policies, and then we're able to then build the rest of the policies. And I do have some suggestions for some immediate policies. Some we've already approved at a previous meeting. Let me just show you what our policy was before. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. Get all the way out of this.
I think you lost your volume, Dawn. It doesn't look like you're muted. But we still can't hear you, or I can't hear you. Dawn, you may want to try going into settings and see if there's something in there, maybe to select a different microphone maybe, or. Okay, thank you. She's going to jump off and jump back on. I'm good for just a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yay.
Okay.
We can't see you though.
Oh, really? Oh, hold on.
There
Okay.
we go.
So I'm going to try this again to show you the policies. It keeps telling me I can't share my screen, so I don't know what that is. I put it in the Google Drive.
Where's the document? Is it in
the Google Drive? But I think I put it in the closed.
Okay, I'll pull it up.
Okay. So we first need to discuss our policy on policies. We had previously approved this in 2014. I found the original document, so this would be a revision. And it, if no one wants to look at that or consider that format in terms of the various components to the policy, then that's fine. We can start all over again. The charter school in which I received their policy manual was very, very minimal. So, we don't have to make it fancy. So these were the suggested policies. First was a policy on policy. They actually just called it the adoption of a new policy or the revision of a current policy, and it was really more procedural. I took pieces of that and put it inside our policy on policy. So it outlined what we would do if a new policy wanted to be adopted. The previous one, we had more dates, like we would review all policies annually. So if that's something that we want to consider, that kind of language, then you all can let me know. I believe, already have a conflict of interest policy, a nepotism policy. They had a policy on board meetings, participation by the public, that went a little bit beyond, the open meeting law, but, went into details on how the public would participate in the actual meeting. I believe we've already approved a code of ethics or a code of conduct for board members. I think Jane had another policy, and I couldn't recall what that was that we've already adopted. Paul has almost completed, if that's correct, Paul, the grievance policy. And then their board bylaws were part of their policy manual, and they broke out each individual element as its own individual kind of policy, which I thought was way too much, that we could just create a policy that the bylaws might be reviewed every year, or that process has to be reviewed before nomination or anything like that. Those were the bulk of the policy manual were school policies. And then within this giant manual, towards the rear, were board operation policies, and then basically their bylaws. So these are the ones that at a minimum, I think we need to get working on. Again, I think the conflict of interest and nepotism, because we've already signed off on the documentation, is actually a policy that we probably just need to find the language and insert it into the approved format. So those are the ones that, as a committee, I would like Paul and I to start to gather all the information. And once we approve the policy on policies, or how we actually want policies to look in terms of the mechanics of the page, then we can start filling it in. Is there any other policy that someone thinks is should be immediately looked at and developed from a board policy? There was another document in there, in that folder, Michelle, which was the policy on policies, if you see it.
I'm looking at that. I think Paul's presenting right now. What's in there is just a blank document. It's not the actual policy on policies. It's it's filled in on some, because that was the format that I wanted us to talk about. All right, let's see.
I'm looking. That was in another folder.
And then the second page had procedures on how we adopt a policy. I think it was a PDF, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, that's
yeah. So the form becomes an element of the policy as well. So I just wanted feedback in terms of the look of the policy.
So there it is. I'm sorry, Dawn. Yeah. There it is.
So this is the actual policy on policies, where we have a policy statement. And again, this is something that we discussed and approved in 2014. So if we don't want all that detail, because I've seen policy, run from, the most simple things to quite elaborate. But that was actually the approved policy from 2014. So do we want to revise it, I guess is the question. So that includes, do we want to call a library? Are we starting to, electronically gather these policies in some kind of named repository, a numbering system, the issue date, the revised date, the actual name of the policy, its actual statement. Before we wanted a reason for the policy. Some people are interested in that. A lot of times policies are developed out of problems. So this could address it. Somebody may feel that's not necessary. The entities affected by this policy, who should read this policy, all of that maybe is a little much, and it, turns it into like a 2-page. We could take out some of those things. And then if you go to the following pages, where the policy, the actual policy could be found. So that's at board web link. Maybe now it's going to be a Google document where the form has to be found. And then the procedures for adopting or revising policy. So this can be a presentation for you all to review and approve at the next board meeting. And in between that time, send any edits or comments. It's in the Google Drive. And then once we approve it, in the meantime, Paul and I can gather the language on the other suggested policies. Any questions?
Dawn, were there any revisions that immediately stood out to you and Paul that needed to be made on this one? Or is it just something that we all may need to look at as a board to see if there are revisions?
Yes, I thought it was a little much. There's a lot of stuff in here. So I don't know if we need, the entities affected, and I don't know if we really need the reason for the policy, but sometimes that's very helpful because I know we have, and I know, personally as the former chair, have explained a lot as to why we have a particular policy. Sometimes it makes it a little easier for someone to absorb and consume at first glance versus reading it and then still not understanding why this particular policy is the way that it is, and then having to go back and ask for more information. But other than a couple of things, I do think it's important that we let people know where policies are and that all appropriate forms or additional documentation is attached to the policy. So they're not reading one thing and then searching all over the place for the form that they need to complete or anything like that. So I do think that that's important. And of course, if we have this in electronic format, then we can put direct links in.
I think
as long as we make sure that the links are always live as we go forward.
And one thing I'll add is that the Davidson Charter School format and organization approach was a good one that Dawn had provided. I think one of the things that we'll have to take a look at, as well as the syntax maybe of the policies within that document, because of the way it organizes them based on numbers, and it seems to be a good method.
Yeah, it was quite. I mean, how many pages was it, Paul? It was like close to 100. It was very simple, but it was a lot. They covered everything, even how I think they had a policy on how to do like an EpiPen or something, had to do with a medical procedure and the policy on when that is delivered. So it was quite comprehensive. I mean, but again, most of it was school policies, and then the board operations were towards the back.
Exactly. And so, but it's the kind of thing that you can add policies to and then be able to revise it.
Right.
And add to it later on. And hopefully we never get that complex with ours. But nevertheless, that's where things are. And I think Dawn has done 95% more than I have on it. To be honest, we've been pretty swamped with a lot of different things. But hopefully we can start getting in on some of these and editing them and bring them down to a format. I think the intent and the direction of the policies wouldn't change. It may be more along what some of the language would be if that was deemed appropriate.
Yeah, I do think we have quite a number. It's just what kind of format do we want to put them in, and in what kind of organization, as Paul's mentioning. I did like this procedure a little bit better because policies can come up at any point in time. In the previous copy was really, we'll review policies annually. Well, you know, something may happen where you need to develop a policy. And so this kind of allows it to happen whenever, just it has to go through, you know, a first reading unless the board wants kind of like an emergency policy put into place. So I do think that was helpful because we, you know, rarely probably just stick to once a year. I think a review once a year is necessary just to make sure that we're doing what we need to do and that everything is up to date. But policies can be created at any time during the year. I think that gives us a little bit more flexibility. So I will leave this in the Google Drive. Please use the next 30 days to review, add any edits or comments. In the meantime, Paul and I will try to gather the actual language. I know that at a previous meeting, we approved 2 policies and one was the board conduct. So we will gather those up so that when we have an approval on the format, then we can just transfer that language into the appropriate format. And also, if we have any thoughts, I don't know if a Google document is the be all to some kind of repository for important things like policies. I don't know if we don't have a, I don't know where else we would put them, I guess. But then access to it becomes a question, like who gets to have access to board policies? This was on their website, and that certainly, we can certainly have a manual that can be accessed by our public and staff, and then the actual documents within a Google Drive for, you know, revisions as needed. Does that sound? Because you guys, Dr. Edwards, you don't have a, not a, what is it called? Like an intranet?
A database?
No, an intranet, like a system within your network that only people can get in with the login system. Okay. So if that sounds reasonable, then we'll, you know, if anybody has any other thoughts, they can also add that on, but we'll present the next month our recommendation for where these should be housed.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a way to pull out from the Davidson so that we could see the formatting of how could you pull something out of their manual?
Like that whole 1 through 4, pretty much. I mean, it was literally the most generic looking.
Or actually, we can just go on their website and look.
I can upload the whole PDF. Would you like me to upload the whole PDF into the Google Drive so that you can look at all of the policies that they have? It was really interesting to see how, not detailed, but how many things they cover. So I'll upload that as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Dawn and Paul, for working on that. I know it's a lot. Okay, so moving on to unfinished business. The first item under unfinished business is our Board of Directors Code of Conduct for possible action. This is something that was postponed from our regular board meeting on September the 22nd of 2020. Let's see, I need to stop sharing this. Let's see. And I'll see if I can pull that policy up as well. All right, I'm gonna present now. And actually, It actually still has some of my comments up there. I made some notations yesterday just to clean some things up.
So Michelle, are you saying that we did not approve this already?
Yes, that's correct. We
Oh.
approved the mission statement and the fundraising policy.
Oh, fundraising. Okay.
Mhm. Did everyone get a chance to review?
I did on this one, Michelle. If you scroll down to the very bottom, I had put a note in the document. Hold on. Number 11. I just thought that should be a little bit broader. That, you know, if you're going to state that, I don't think any board member should be trying to secure special privileges for any child, not just their child or their children or close friends, but any individual child.
I agree with that, Rodney. One thought that I had too was that not just for the students or for the children, but also for board members themselves.
That's a good point. I mean, we could just say, you know, I will not use my position as board member to secure special privileges for, you know, students or stakeholders. Something on to do them overall.
Or even, you know, staff.
Yeah, why don't you just say students, faculty, staff, or board member?
I would just say we won't use our position as a board member to secure special privileges, period.
For anyone.
I will not use my position as a board member to secure special privileges for. Should we go ahead and make this change now?
Sure.
Sure.
For any student. Parent.
Faculty or stakeholder.
Stakeholder or contractor.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that list could be
long.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards Paul's suggestion that is secure special privilege for any person or entity.
Oh, that sounds
I
good.
like that, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead. The things that I added through here are just where I added in a period or paragraph spacing. So I'm just going to check these off. I added a period, paragraph spacing, paragraph spacing, paragraph spacing, paragraph. I added a header and a footer to add the page numbers since it made it on 2 pages.
And remind me why we tabled this. Were there any other outstanding concerns?
So there were I think there were lots of different edits that have been done between the board meetings.
Do we say anything about I agree to complete required trainings?
There was a section in there about, like, I will be prepared for meetings or any tasks that are assigned to us or something.
Number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One comment that I made, and I actually asked Dr. Carpenter about this, it was in number 3, the section, I will refrain from giving directives to faculty, staff, and management. And I recognize that any suggestions to faculty, staff, and management I may make from time to time carrying no board authority with them. And so I brought up the fact that from time to time we might ask Brad to post things on the internet for us, or any of our the administrative staff to assist us. And what Dr. Carpenter was saying was that that doesn't, those individuals are there to support the board as well. So that's not specifically what it's talking about. Okay, are there any other questions, comments?
So when this is, as this is approved, does this become a policy that's amongst those? Or is this something that's referenced and attached to the bylaws?
Well, right now it would not be attached to our bylaws. That's something that we could certainly, it wouldn't be attached to the bylaws at all.
So it's got to go somewhere, so I might think it's a policy then?
Could it be the policy that a board member has to sign the?
Yeah, exactly. And here's
So
yeah, all board members must.
I'm trying to think it needs to go somewhere so it doesn't get lost or out of place or something like that.
Well, there's some, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Edwards, but isn't the nepotism and the conflict of interest, is that required by the Office of Charter Schools for the board? I know it goes somewhere, or is that just like on file? You know how we all signed it this year via DocuSign?
I believe it is all on file. I do know that the chair has to sign something that we have. I think Michelle helped Jane and I with that earlier. But I do know that it does stay on file with OCS.
So that is that something that like the school would be reviewed whether their board had signed the appropriate documents?
Yeah.
I don't know why I felt like in the beginning, that's how it was explained to us, that this was kind of required.
It's required in the charter agreement for the nepotism and the conflict of interest, I believe also.
Yeah.
So do we want to entertain a motion to approve the code of conduct and then address whether we need a policy that all board members sign the code of conduct?
I make a motion to accept the NES Board of Directors Code of Conduct as presented.
Second.
We have a motion to accept the New Charter School Board of Directors Code of Conduct, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion?
Was that Worley second? Is that you, Paul?
Yeah, I think Rodney did too. So take one.
So can we, just a note, so when we approve this after this meeting, when we document it in minutes, can we just, I know we're working on the format, can we just somewhere in the document put like Rev 1.0, we have an official starting point for a revision where we're going to work on the format and the policy?
I'm sorry, Rodney, you were kind of muffled a little bit. Can you say that again?
But when we approve it and we publish it in our minutes, let's go ahead and stamp it as revision 1.0.
Okay.
Because it's our first approved revision. And then as we figure out the format and as part of the long-way policy issues, we can work on our formatting, but let's stamp this document that it's revision 1.0.
You want to put that in the footer?
Cool.
Yeah, Michelle.
Can we put today's date?
Well, no, you wouldn't date it here. That's just the revision. And then in minutes, the date will cover when we approve it.
When we say revision or version?
Let's say version. For draft, I don't know.
Version 2.
Okay. All right, hearing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote to approve the new Charter School Board of Directors and Officer Code of Conduct. Nicole Booker,
Aye.
Don Dixon,
Aye.
Rodney Dunn,
Aye.
Robbie Taylor,
Aye.
Benji Woodard,
Aye.
Paul Whirling,
Aye.
and I, Michelle Denning, aye as well. Okay. Motion passes. Okay, and the next item of unfinished business is to review and discuss our proposed Board of Directors fundraising group certification policy. This was postponed from our regular Board of Directors meeting also from September the 22nd as well. Okay, I'll stop sharing. And I will pull up that policy. Okay, so this is our NCS Board of Director fundraising group certification policy. Was discussed at our prior regular board meeting in September. And we were supposed to go back and review and make any revisions. I will entertain a motion to approve the group certification, fundraising group certification policy.
Booker, so moved.
Second.
That done.
We have a motion and a second on the approval of our Board of Director fundraising group certification policy. Is there any discussion?
What if someone does fundraising and they're not certified? Do we need to, well, I guess my question is, do we need to explain any action if someone violates the policy?
Good question. I would assume that they would be requested to cease and desist from fundraising.
So Dr. Edward, tell us your experience with this right here, because I see what they're saying. If student ambassadors decide that they want to go on a trip and they say, hey, we're going to go to Chick-fil-A or wherever and do a fundraiser today. So give us some insight on what you're thinking here.
Or folks are just innocently ignorant of policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Essentially what this is it creates a framework for which to fundraise on behalf of Miss Charter School. And the certification policy is a process. They would complete essentially a Google form that also includes an indication on there that they are willing to open up their books and be transparent with us. Not doing that completely stops the process. Anyone who operates outside of this would be asked to cease and desist. But Dawn, I think it's actually a really good idea to put something in there that says, anyone who operates outside of this policy, XYZ. Yeah.
Because I think for policies, I mean, in all fairness, if students do something wrong, it's in the policy what the ramifications. So just, I mean, something that obviously gives you flexibility for someone who may be completely unaware that the policy exists and meant no harm, and then someone who is clearly trying to work around the system, maybe even repeatedly, and so however you want to frame that. I think so. Again, when someone's consuming the policy, they have all of the information, as opposed to say, well, it didn't say that anything would happen to me if I did it.
Right. So maybe it would be anyone who is found to be operating outside of this policy or found to be fundraising on behalf of this charter school. It is not a certified fundraising group. Will be notified by the superintendent to cease and desist. A follow-up meeting will be determined, or a follow-up meeting will be scheduled, and it will be determined then if you will be allowed to fundraising, possible probation for 12 months, something like that.
Right.
So do we think about this some more? And
do you feel, I mean, I feel like if you think you could come up with your one sentence that gives you your, latitude to, that's, in my mind, fine with us to go ahead and approve it with Dr. Edwards' additional line or additional sentence.
So
I would hold it up a whole other month on one sentence.
Could it? I mean, are you thinking on it just be something as broad as like anyone violating this policy would be referred to the superintendent for further, disciplinary action or something?
Yeah.
Violation of this policy may result in disciplinary action. Or violation be reported to the superintendent and may result in disciplinary action.
May be subject to action by the superintendent, and just really broaden the,
Yeah.
And it may just be a little conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and it may be, I've told you 6 times, so now,
Right.
Violations of this policy may result in
Further action by the superintendent?
Further action.
Okay, so I'd like to amend my motion to include that violation of this policy may, I got the wording wrong, may be subject to further action by the superintendent.
Okay, so first we'll have to vote on the motion to amend the original motion.
Well, the sentence doesn't say that.
What?
Nicole said may be subject to further action.
By the superintendent.
Is there a difference?
What do you want it to say?
I like your statement, Nicole. I mean, Dr. Edwards is I think it's basically saying the same thing, but may be subject.
So we would have to change it to say anyone who violates may be subject.
Yes.
As opposed to
Okay,
saying
anyone who.
violations may result in them.
Oh, well, then
Yeah,
that's fine. It doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to make sure for the record we were the motion and the statement matched, but that's fine. If you're fine with that, Dr. Edwards.
Yeah.
So are we leaving it?
And just to be clear, so anyone who violates this policy may be subject to further action by the superintendent.
Okay, so are we changing it then?
Yeah, that's my motion to amend.
Right, so any Are we changing it in here in the document? Any
Yes.
person or group that violates this policy may be subject to further action of the superintendent. Any person or group that violates this policy may be subject to further action of the superintendent.
Including but not limited to confiscation of funds.
Oh, Paul just took it to the next level.
Well, you gotta have
That's right, Melissa. Melissa's like, give me the money.
I mean, really, you gotta have somebody look at it and say, you know.
Yeah, that would make me walk the straight and narrow. If they're gonna, if you put in a whole bunch of work.
Yeah, up to, up
Including
to,
but not limited to forfeiture of the funds.
yeah.
Yeah.
Up to, you could say up to, or some are all. I mean, it is wide open.
Well, the only thing with that is in the other policy that we approved, that it articulates that all the fundraising, resourcing, et cetera, is under the purview of the superintendent already.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then this would just support the rationale for being able to take it.
Well, true. Yeah, I guess what you're saying there, Rodney, is it's already been caught. You never had it. So
You don't own it to begin with. It's already part of the policy.
I think if this is your first time out with this kind of shift, we've had a school that quite frankly has been quite comfortable kind of doing this, that, and everything on their own, sometimes with support of administration, like do whatever, and sometimes not, that you might want to get everything in there now and make sure that it's layered and in direct support of every other policy. So.
Dr. Carpenter, I think you had a comment that you would like to make, and I'll turn the floor over to you for a moment.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. Just wanted to suggest a bit of language, maybe just say something like subject to disciplinary action by the school. And that way you imply an accountability, and you can kind of figure out later if you have to do it, what that action would be. But
Which could
good
include
discussion.
forfeiture.
Good discussion there.
So any person or group that violates this policy may be subject to disciplinary action by the school.
Okay.
Is everybody good with that? Or
That doesn't make you the meanie, Dr. Edwards.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Oh, yes, it does.
any person or group that violates may be subject to disciplinary action.
So one way that some people are going to circumvent the fundraising is they're going to get somebody to give a gift. So we need to figure out in here how we're going to address that also.
What do you mean,
Because
Robbie?
I've already heard people saying, well, I can give $5,000 or $10,000 gift to do what needs to be done. So,
Isn't that fine or?
what?
Do we have any policies that allow people or disallow people to earmark gifts?
Well, didn't we have that? Wasn't that in another policy?
Well, Dawn just, she was referencing earlier that in the past, people have basically done exactly like they wanted to. So if we're going to address this, we have to address that.
But it is a gift problematic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I'm walking in there and I decide that I'm going to give a $5,000 machine, I'll say, for instance, shooting machine, I want us to have a new shooting machine. And that's not in balance with what Dr. Edwards' spending is for her hierarchy as far as what's important, whatever. That's a problem.
I almost think this should be a separate policy. Because this is
Let's look at
fundraising.
that.
I drafted one of those.
I know
Wasn't
that.
there a directed giving policy or the draft of a directed giving policy somewhere?
Yes, we talked about it.
We did talk about it.
And there's a draft.
Yes.
It's on the, sent it out and got comments.
So wait, so I was looking, I just pulled it back up. In the other policy that we approved last time, it doesn't give the specific details, but it says, it is the policy of the New Charter School Board of Directors, NCS Superintendent has authority over all fundraising activities and all plans, decisions, blah, 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 blah. And it says, and the individual who fundraising will have its faculty, administration, team plus, or any other NCS stakeholder shall not plan, implement, including the solicitation of gifts without prior approval from the superintendent.
I think there's a little bit of a distinction there when you're talking about receiving a gift versus the solicitation of a gift.
Which is actually fundraising if you're soliciting a gift.
Yeah.
So but if someone just walks in and says, I want to give XYZ, I mean, that's not fundraising. They just walked in the door and said, I want to gift this, which it can be declined depending on, what it is or who it is or whatever.
Yeah, I think we just need to finalize that gift policy and get that on the books.
Okay, so right now we have a motion and a second to approve the board director fundraising group certification policy. We also have a motion to amend the original motion. It was not seconded, so that motion dies, but we will need to, if an amendment wants to be made, another amendment would have to be made to the original motion. So if, Nicole, if you want to make another motion to amend.
Sure. I'll make a motion to amend my original motion to include following sentence, any person or group that violates this policy may be subject to disciplinary action by the school.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, any discussion on the vote on the motion to amend? Okay, I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote on the motion to amend only. Nicole Booker.
Aye.
Dawn Dixon.
Aye.
Rodney Dunn.
Aye.
Robbie Taylor.
Aye.
Benji Woodard.
Aye.
Paul Worley.
Aye.
And Michelle Denning, aye. So we have approved the amendment to the original motion, and so we need to vote on the motion itself. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion before we vote on the original motion to approve the fundraising group certification policy? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote by roll call. Nicole Booker. You're on mute, Nicole.
Sorry about that. So we're voting on the original motion.
Right, so we voted to amend the original motion, and now we have to approve the original motion to approve the policy.
As amended, correct?
As amended, that's correct.
Okay. Aye.
Dawn Dixon,
Aye.
Rodney Dunn,
Aye.
Robbie Taylor,
Aye.
Benji Woodard,
Aye.
Paul Worley,
Aye.
and Michelle Denning, aye. Motion carries, and we have approved the NCS Board of Directors fundraising group certification policy. Okay. Next item is under, let me stop sharing the screen here. 1 second. Okay. That's all for unfinished business. The next item is new business. To discuss the motions log and ad hoc committee for possible action. So it was brought up about having someone put together a motions log. Dr. Carpenter, would you mind explaining the motions log?
I'm happy to, Madam Chair. So you all know how this is, right? You're in a board meeting, and I even heard it once this evening. Didn't we do something about that at some other time? Didn't we vote on something? Didn't we adopt something? Obviously, so the more time that goes by within an organization and the more board turnover you have, the more of that institutional memory becomes lost. But there are times when it becomes very critical for the board to know what it has said collectively. And when I use the phrase what it has said, I'm obviously referring to the board as a collective, and I'm talking about votes in most cases. Sometimes things are decided by consensus, but generally speaking on the big substantive decisions, we want to keep it to votes. So a motions log is just a spreadsheet that starts when the school became operational, and I basically go through and for each line on the spreadsheet, the date, the exact motion copied and pasted out of the minutes and plugged right into the spreadsheet, who moved it, who seconded it, and then the action on whether it carried or failed. And then once you've got, you all are about 15 years old, as I recall, once you've got all 15 years worth of board actions into a single spreadsheet, you can search on anything, and you can find out instantly without having to look back through 15 year minutes what the board has said about a thing previously. And there are times when that is an extremely valuable thing. So there is a fair amount of clerical work involved in transcribing, copying, and pasting the data. So I think my recommendation to schools is usually hire a temp worker or somebody like that that has the skills and the ability to go through all these minutes, create that motions log, and then it becomes a really powerful tool. We did this at York Prep. It was one of my first items of business, was getting their 5 years worth of minutes into a motions log. We came up one day, I think it was in the spring, we had to deal with a serious student discipline issue, and it was an expulsion sort of level type of offense. And my administrative team got divided about what the board's current policy actually was, because one person remembered one thing, another administrator remembered another thing. We pulled the motions log up, we searched on expulsion and a few related words. Boom, we had exactly what the board had done, when they had done it. And then once we figured out, according to the motions log, what was the board's thing, we then called the school's general counsel and said, hey, we see the board decided this in April. Do you have the policy that was decided at the time? They said, yep. And we were then able to comply exactly with board policy without guessing what the current thing was. So that's just one example of how a motions log can generate a lot of value for you down the road. But definitely a bit of work creating it.
Dr. Edwards?
Yes.
Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on this? I believe you may have discussed it with Jane. I don't know if there are existing individuals that we could utilize for this, or
There probably are. I would need to really kind of figure out who that might be. Right now, if we were to look at maybe some staff that we have, everybody is stretched pretty thin, trying to cover socially distanced children and all of the things that entails. But I also know the magnitude of this project is extensive, with 15 years or 14 years. And considering how long that's going to take and how much work is going to go into it. I know Jane and I talked about leveraging some staff that we had, but we don't yet have a direction on what that's going to look like.
When also, given the history of minutes, and I've read a bunch of them, I'll be honest with you, I don't know that we need to be going back 15 years. Maybe we go back a year, and we all pretty much have collectively been here, or 2 years. And if there's any questions about clarity, we can try to provide the best of it and move forward. But I wouldn't want a job to have to go back 15 years. I mean,
Dr. Carpenter?
Not to be disagreeable with you, Rodney, but I'd recommend starting with the most recent and slowly working your way back to the start. Because if y'all end up in a high stakes lawsuit, and we've got a couple of attorneys here who can speak to this, the opposing counsel is going to get a hold of as many of your documents as they think that they need to read. And if they can show that a previous board said something and it was never changed by the current board, then you're now you're defending yourself against an accusation that you didn't do your duty of care, because the board at the time that it was decided, until it's changed, your board has a duty under the law to follow it. So you don't. That's why I say go all the way back, so that if you need to clean anything up or revise anything that was decided by the past board, you do that so that you're not creating risk exposure for yourself in the present.
Dr. Carpenter, let me ask this question. As far as, your smaller motions, like motions that were made to adjourn or motions to go into closed session, are you talking about including those as well? Or
No.
just significant?
No, I call those incidental motions, and I do have samples of this, by the way, on my website for those of you that have logged on to create accounts. So no, I'm not talking about incidental motions like adjourn and approving minutes. I'm talking about motions of substance where some school business or thing was actually decided by the board.
Okay. So maybe this is something that we should table until the next meeting for all of us to think about this, and determine, maybe Dr. Edwards can look into to see if there's some existing staff that can be utilized versus having to hire a temporary person to do this. So let's all give it some more thought, and we'll table that until do we want to put together a committee to look at this?
I don't think we need a committee so much as we just need for Dr. Edwards to determine if there's staff available or we need to seek outside. And I do think it's important. I know it seems like a huge undertaking, but I think once it was done, I think it would be valued and would answer a lot of questions.
So if we've got our minutes that have been scanned in PDF, even if they're like image type PDFs, would be a standard that I've seen you all use. You've got the full suite. I think you can run them through in OCR them, where you basically recognize what the text is, so that at least gives you some way you can do searching. So I'll just note that. I'm saying if you can't get to doing something like this immediately, at least if the minutes or the PDFs have been processed, you can search words based on years. That doesn't make it happen, but that's a start.
Well, also, if we could start, I mean, would anyone have any idea where the minutes are from, like prior to even me coming? I don't even know who the secretary was. When I came on board, I think I immediately became the secretary. But prior to that, I have literally no clue where any of those, Dave may know, but I think first is just trying to gather what minutes we can find, put them into, folders of years, and then, start with that. Because I think there's going to be a little bit of a search to try to find minutes from the early years.
And Madam Chair, that's exactly my point right there. And I think that Ms. Dixon's experience probably be seconded by just about everybody who's ever served on a board. And there's just no reason for someone to come onto the board and walk in blind to what the institutional history has been. For one thing, you can end up reinventing the wheel when you really didn't need to if you just had a searchable document. So Thank you, Ms. Dixon. That is exactly my point about the value of this thing.
Okay, so I think we'll table the discussion then until next meeting. I think we probably all agree that we probably need to do it. It's just a matter of how to do it. So, Gwen?
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna go back in my folder and try to gather all of the documents, all the minutes I can find.
And Brad may have some where he's had them and saved them on, to put them online. So,
I'll
okay,
jump
well,
in here real quick. We've got minutes going back to the 2013-14 school year online.
okay. Brad, are you aware if there's any prior to that? Or is
Everything I've had, I've put online. Everything
Okay.
I've digitized and put online.
Okay, so we know we have at least going back to 2013, 14, easily accessible. We just have to locate the others. So, okay, so, and that may be that may be why Jane had suggested potentially putting together an ad hoc committee so that we could locate those. Do we want to do that, or we want to go ahead and table it for next month? You're muted, Dawn.
I don't know if we need a whole committee because it probably would basically just be one phone call to Chris and one phone call to Dave to see if they have any idea. And I can pretty much guess what they're, from the early days, I can pretty much guess that they may say they have no idea where it is, where the minutes are.
Does anybody want to call Chris and Dave?
Nobody wants to call Kristen.
Well,
super nice guys.
I'll shoot him an email if I don't hear back. That I'll give him a call. I just saw Chris, but
Thank you, Dawn.
No problem.
Okay, so Dawn will call or email Chris and Dave, and Dr. Edwards is going to look into seeing what staff we may have available, and the rest of us, we're certainly going to think about ideas of how we might could accomplish this and revisit it at the next meeting. The next item of new business is superintendent personnel recommendations for possible action. Dr. Edwards, will that be in closed session?
Yes.
Okay. And the next item is discuss special board of director meeting to review NCS 990 and our 2019-2020 audit results. Dr. Edwards, do you know when that will be ready?
We are expecting the report this week.
Okay. And that has to be submitted by November the 15th?
Yes.
And that goes to the Office of Charter Schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So with that being said, we will not meet, we don't have a regular meeting between now and then. So I think what we may need to do is have a special meeting prior to November the 15th. So that we can review the audit before it's submitted.
So, and Michelle, you said review the audit. We aren't going to approve the audit.
That's correct. Yes, we have to review and approve the audit. That's not, yes.
So, so my question is, if I'm reviewing what's essentially a tax return, if we're approving it, are we speaking to, its accuracy and its, that's my concern. We're approving something that I don't think we're qualified to approve.
Dr. Carpenter?
Yeah, that's a great question, Madam Chair. Here's the answer, kind of a boilerplate answer that I give. With two of you being attorneys, you'll recognize what I'm getting at here. So under statute, typically, as volunteers especially, you are allowed to reasonably rely on the guidance, recommendations, and work of others, provided that you believe them to be advising you within the scope of their expertise. So if you couldn't do that as board members, you would have to all go get your doctorates in education, and we'd all have to go become CPAs, and we'd all also have to be attorneys, because every single thing we approve, we don't have the expertise for that. So your auditor, as long as they've always been forthright with you, in other words, clearly under the statute, and I'm generalizing here, but if someone's been dishonest with you, then that's can be an issue. But if your auditor's been honest with you in the past, and you reasonably believe them to be an expert at auditing, which you obviously do because you hired them as a board, then you're allowed to reasonably rely on it. So if you ever got, I don't know, accused is the right word, but if there were some repercussions about some mistake with your audit, your answer would be, we reasonably relied on what our auditor told us, and what we thought was the right course of action. So I don't remember, Madam Chair, I know we had some discussion in the last week or two about if there was any requirement to approve the 990, and I don't remember where we got to with that as far as your authorizer goes, but that, of course, goes to the IRS primarily. I don't think it's absolutely mission critical that you approve the 990, but I do believe that the board should review that with the auditor present, because that is your corporate tax return, and you're making representations to the IRS. And of course, if they ever come auditing, you want to have crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's with the IRS. So I would recommend that you approve the audit, which your authorizer is probably expecting you to do, although I can't say with certainty, and that you enter into the minutes that you reviewed the 990 as a board.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. So we'll need to set up a time or schedule a special meeting to review the audit, approve the audit, and review the 990 with the auditor. Dr. Edwards, can you reach out to them and find out when they might be available?
I sure will.
Okay, and then we'll just maybe later this week, Jane will send out an email to determine when we might could set a time before November 15th. So just be thinking about when you may be available for that. Okay. Ongoing board development and self-assessment. We don't have anything under this. We did the micro training earlier. And then, Dr. Carpenter, did you have something to add?
No, I was giving you a thumbs up, Madam Chair. We did the micro training at the top of the agenda.
Okay. So I know we have a personnel matter, so I will entertain a motion to go into closed session for personnel discussion pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11A6.
Booker, so moved.
Second, Worland.
We have a motion to go into closed session for personnel discussions. We have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Nicole Booker.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Rodney Dunn.
Aye.
Robbie Taylor.
Aye.
Benji Woodard.
Aye.
Paul Worley.
Aye.
And Michelle Denning, aye. Motion carries, and we are going out of open session, going into closed session, and I think that you should have a link already. Okay, we are all back now, and we are in open session. We were previously in closed session for personnel matters pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11A6. And I will entertain a motion to approve personnel matters that were discussed and committed in closed session.
Booker, so moved.
Second.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion to approve the personnel recommendation made by Dr. Edwards in closed session. I'm going to do a roll call vote now. Nicole Booker,
Aye.
Dawn Dixon,
Aye.
Rodney Dunn, Rodney Dunn,
Sorry, it comes on mute when you join back. Aye.
is it- Robbie Taylor,
Aye.
Benji Woodard,
Aye.
Paul Rowley,
Aye.
Michelle Denning, aye. Motion carries, and the personal recommendation has been approved. And that is the end of our agenda. There are no items left on the agenda, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.